Let's talk vinyl.
Indie rocker Mike Fox is cracking open his record collection, one album at a time. If you're listening on a regular podcast app, you'll get the vinyl talk, but if you want the full experience, music and all, smash that link in the show description and tune in on Mixcloud. Here's your host, Mike Fox.
Greetings, vinyl lovers and high-fidelity junkies. It's time to gather round and discuss how money changes everything. I mean, it's time to discuss the most authentic form of music consumption out there. Let's talk vinyl. I'm your host, Mike Fox. What I meant to say earlier was, if you're tuning in via Mixcloud, Money Changes Everything was the first song I played by The Brains at the beginning of this episode. By the way, notice that this episode title doesn't have just one album name included or a band's name included. That's because for the first time in Let's Talk Vinyl history, as short as that history is, I'm thrilled to announce that we have a guest here. Virtually, and yes, that guest played guitar on that first track you just heard from an Atlanta-based new wave alt-rock band from the late 70s, early 80s, around the time I was born, The Brains. He has quite the rock and roll resume that extends beyond rock into other mesmerizing genres, including folk. He spent a good part of his career playing bass. He also plays the mandolin and other instruments that we'll talk about. He was the bassist for the Georgia Satellites. Please welcome our very first guest ever on Let's Talk Vinyl, Rick Price. How are you, Rick?
Hey, man, I'm good. What? Quite an intro. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. It was well rehearsed.
Made me look good there. I appreciate it. My mom will thank you.
Of course.
You're honored to be the first guest. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm very excited. Now, during our first ever off-air conversation a couple weeks ago, I enjoyed it very much, and I hope these microphones capture that similar energy on that day. And I remember back then in that conversation, you were mentioned that Steve Lillywhite had produced both the first and second album by The Brains.
You're correct, sir. Yeah, a pleasure it was, too. I think if my memory serves me right, it's been a while, but I believe it's the first time that Steve had actually even been to the States. We all were a lot younger at that point. Steve was really pretty young and real experienced for being as young as he was. So the guy was really a good producer, and I learned a lot from him. Great guy, super nice guy, and very, very qualified to do what he did. So, yeah, it was an honor to have that guy do it.
Yeah, and there was a few songs for The Brains that you had worked on, which we'll play. Asphalt Wonderland is one of them.
Well, yeah, Tom actually wrote Asphalt Wonderland, but it's I just mentioned that as one of my favorite Brain songs. Kind of doesn't get played much, obviously.
Yeah.
The hit Money Changes Everything, thanks to Cyndi Lauper, not necessarily us, even though
83, right? She covered that, right?
Yeah, pre-internet, free record distribution to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one beautiful thing of the internet but we had very limited record distribution, and so we pressed it all in vinyl, paid for it ourselves, did it in Nashville, put out 45s, which a lot of groups did at that point. A lot of the New York groups were doing that.
Yeah.
I believe it was Jim and New Jersey. There were several distributors, but it was very limited record distribution. Nowadays, totally different ballgame, for sure.
Did you think it was going to lead to other things down the road?
Well, Tom Gray and myself had known each other, pretty much since right out of college, doing different things.
Okay.
We'd done different groups, and Tom had written these songs. The great thing about The Brains is we really didn't have much of a blueprint as far as what grew into new wave and punk and what have you.
Right.
It was really virginal right out of the gate, and Tom was definitely shooting from the hip. Our influences, Iggy Pop.
Yes.
And I like playing loud. Tom liked all the stuff, and he and I really just got along well. Like I say, it was pretty innocent. We first started recording on a 4-track machine in his bedroom.
Oh, is that right?
And we made some tapes, which Tom really did the drums, and this is not really with drum machines, just I say multi-track, and we only had a 4-track machine, but we'd stack all this stuff. And Tom did the drums electronically with a synthesizer.
Oh,
really manually.
that is so
And,
cool. I would have never guessed
yeah,
that.
it was interesting sounding stuff. I don't know, God, how to 9 Inch Nails maybe. Even though Trent Reznor, by the time he would start doing all of his stuff, it was much more advanced. All the electronic aspect of music was we later on in the Brains' career, we ended up getting a Prophet synthesizer, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was still analog. It was, well, maybe not. It might have been digital. I'm not quite sure about that one. But a Prophet ended up being like the state of the art at the time.
And this was around the time of MTV. So did any of your songs end up as music videos? And did they get any airplay?
They kind of did. I mean, it was pre-music video as well. I mean, we were on Mercury. We got actually got a record deal on Mercury. Mercury Poison kind of turned out to be correct, but they were kind of reluctant to put out videos at the time. I think videos really were more promotional, and it wasn't anything for mass consumption. MTV really hadn't happened. We were on a TV show, the Cousin Brucey show in New Jersey, with the Ramones, I believe. I think the Ramones were on there as well before us.
Oh, before you. I was just about, was it the same show?
We played Cousin Brucey was like the soupy sales type of guy, and he was going, guys, these are the brains that ain't to see the dummies.
Oh, no.
But, it was great. It was really fun. He was a piece of work. We got it. We were a big deal in New York, so we proved Sinatra wrong.
There you go.
You can't make it, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Not so much.
Not so much.
We kind of made it in New York to a degree. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It's the most fun I've ever had or had since in a band.
Well, I love the name of the band. I love the raw energy of the sound that you guys came up with.
A weird thing, too, about the name, that was Tom. Tom named the band. Well, kind of another kind of an aside to that was Tom's last name was Gray. So his publishing company was Gray Matter.
Gray Matter, okay.
So that was kind of, it always had a synchronicity about it that worked kind of well.
Yeah.
And Tom was a smart guy. He unfortunately has gone to his great reward, and
yes.
I miss the guy. We knew each other a lot before the Brains, and after the Brains didn't see each other very much, and
Did you always hope for a Brains reunion?
I didn't really.
Okay.
I'm not much of a nostalgia guy.
Right.
I don't know. That just doesn't transfer very well in my mind a lot of times.
I see what you mean, because it's just, there was a different era back then.
Well, it was such a magical era for us.
It was a magical era. That's one of my favorite eras of music.
We were bigger in New York than we were in Atlanta, really in a sense. And Atlanta was nice to us, but, it was crazy how well New York kind of took to the band. That was really interesting and fun. We had a really great time.
It was very raw. And I honestly, I think that if I were to introduce some of your songs to somebody who's never heard of the Brains, I would say, where do you think these guys are from? They'd probably say Britain or something. I believe they really would, or New York.
Lily White liked it. He got interested, and I guess they just played him a tape. I don't really know how Steve became involved, to tell you the truth.
Okay, so you're not sure what demo he might have caught his ears feasted on and said, these guys are
at that time, I remember he brought me some records that he liked, and Joy Division being the main one. So that's kind of where he was coming from.
Joy Division, yes.
And he had done U2, and he had just come from doing Peter Gabriel. And this guy's 24 years old, and this is the type of, well, of course, U2, they weren't U2 yet. Even though they sounded great, but they weren't really great musicians, but they sounded great. They had a great sound.
Yes.
And I think he had come from doing acts like that where Peter Gabriel was a big deal by that point. He had been through Genesis and was doing. And the thing about Peter Gabriel, when Steve got here, I believe the record he worked on did not have cymbals on it for some reason, and it was driving him crazy by that point. You know, everything he didn't have hi-hat, didn't have crash cymbal, didn't have ride cymbal.
I think I remember hearing Phil Collins talking about, maybe it was that album where he did not want, he had Phil play drums on a track. I think it was the third album called Melt. And anyway, he did not want him to play on cymbals.
Yeah, that was the one Steve worked on.
Yeah.
You know, and Steve has gone on to do this. You know, he's just become an uber producer, no doubt about it. He's but very talented guy. You know, his background was started as a tape op, even doing symphonies and stuff like that. And at that point, the tape operator was in a totally separate room, you know, and they were like the Beatles' white lab coat type thing in England, which, you know, it's definitely not the way we grew up. You know, it was beer and sandwiches and pot and other shit, you know, all over the studio, and it was not white lab coats by any means. It was far away from that as you could get,
as far as possible. So tell me about some of those tracks that you had worked on with the Brains.
Well, a real interesting one was Steve loved, and he got this from doing symphonies, ambient recording, and placing mics where and using the room. You know, really using the room in order, and you know, like I'm not that familiar with Jimmy Page doing Zeppelin, but you know, Zeppelin always sounded great to me. You know, and obviously Bonham's drums were huge, but I've heard all different kinds of stories. Two ambient mics above the drums was picking up the whole kit, that kind of stuff. And Steve was way into that kind of stuff. He would listen to the room and could hear. He had great ears. And we actually rented a big warehouse to do one drum track and brought a mobile in to do just one drum track on a song called Sweethearts.
Called Sweethearts.
And, you know, when you're listening back to it in the studio, you can hear it. But as you start mixing and, you know, and it ends up on vinyl and ends up on CD or whatever, really not so much. And you can hear the stuff and reproduce it really with what's available electronically, you know, your reverb units, your digital delays, all of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
But man, it sounded great. And really, you could hear the room amazingly when we initially went back, transferred the tape over to the tape in the studio. And the mobile we used was it was a nice mobile for that time, you know, and especially we recorded in Atlanta. So there was New York, London, LA, there would have been more stuff available than there would have been in Atlanta at that time. Yeah, but Atlanta had some really good studios, you know, at that time even. Yeah. Neve and Studer equipment, you know, it was all analog stuff. So all analog.
What were the songs that stood out for you during that time?
The Brains time period?
Yes.
You know, Money Changes Everything initially right out of the gate. You know, great tune. Tom's songs were good. Tom was a good songwriter. They were unusual. One of my favorites is Asphalt Wonderland.
Wonderland.
I wrote two instrumentals. You know, we grew up in the South and we saw soul bands a lot growing up. And soul bands always open with instrumental songs.
Yes, they do.
You know, James Brown would come out to instrumentals and stuff like that. Yes. And Booker T and the MGs were big with us. You know, obviously Green Onions, but Red Beans and Rice. And a lot of you know, we just grew up with instrumentals. So we opened the Brain sets always with instrumental songs. First one, Treason, I wrote that one. And then Ambush, I wrote that one as well for the second record. That was probably the extent of my songwriting. I helped Tom a little bit, but they were essentially Tom's songs.
Yes.
And other than those two, definitely wrote those two. And they turned out good. You know, I like the way they turned out.
That's always satisfying,
Yeah, it is. And Steve, man, I tell you, Steve got it. And Steve made it sound really good. Other than the first record, when he recorded everything over here and he took the masters to England to master, and he got all set up, ready to master in the studio, and he comes in and the whole studio's torn up.
Are you kidding?
Wow. And they had decided to, whatever they were going to do, bring new gear in, redo the studio or whatever.
Wow.
So he had to deal with that. And I wasn't there. I don't really know. I just heard the stories later on, but I would not have been happy if I was a producer and I was all set up to master a record and the studio was in total disarray, you know?
Right, because he might have thought about, like, I don't want to be a
Yeah, like
disservice to you
Hurricane
guys.
Helene had just gone through or something.
Yeah,
you know? I mean,
yeah, because he's probably thinking about you guys.
yeah, that was kind of an aside. To me, it sounded good, but it didn't sound. Of course, at that point, everybody monitored so loud in the studio. I mean, it was loud as. Well, I'll skip my adjectives here, but it was super loud.
Super
and
effing loud. Yeah.
You know, we were young. We loved it. Yamaha NS10 speakers with tissue paper over the high end was a way. A lot of times we would record or monitor back, and I guess I got this from Pete Townsend, but would take a cassette tape, which was almost state of the art at that time.
Yes.
But go out to my car and listen to it in my car.
Yeah.
To see how the mixes and stuff sounded and what have you to you. But totally different world. But, you know, the guitars, everything sounded huge.
Yes.
The drums sounded huge. The bass sounded great.
Yeah.
Brian Smith was the bass player, did a great job. Charles Wolf, the drummer, did a great job. Charles has left us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Brian I haven't seen in years. I would love to see him. Hope he's still with us. I really don't even know, you know.
Yeah.
It's been years since I've seen that guy, but he did a great job playing bass, no doubt.
So, speaking of bass, during this period, you were the guitarist for the Brains, right?
I was. I kind of grew up playing guitar.
That was your first instrument that you ever learned, am I correct?
Well, guitar was. Yeah, guitar was my first instrument. And then, however, I played bass a lot. I played bass in lounge bands in order to get gigs when I couldn't get guitar gigs. Pretty much always supported myself as a musician, doing other side things.
So after the disbanding of the Brains and the formation of the next group, which was the Georgia Satellites, how did that opportunity to play with the Satellites, how did that come about?
Well, there was a time period in there. It didn't immediately go right to the Satellites.
Okay, there were some bands in between?
There was, there definitely was a band in between. I totally was unemployed. I was engineering in a demo studio. Okay. And just kind of I was bringing my own stuff in, my instrumental stuff. There was a film studio right after the Brains, one of the last gigs the Brains played in New York. This guy liked both of my instrumentals, and he was doing a film.
Oh.
And cool. NYU. He went to NYU, and he came and approached me, and he wanted me to. He said he didn't have much money, but he wanted me to write an instrumental for a movie he was doing.
Oh.
I went, yeah, no problem. No problem. So I did that, and I was working on that, and I was working on this in this demo studio in Atlanta. And actually, Brendan O'Brien worked there as well. And he and I were we did different projects, but we were both in the studio at the same time. Rick Richards and the Satellites were together at that point. However, they had broken up. Oh. A really incestuous story here.
So they broke up before they got big.
But I was, Rick and I were kind of being introduced to each other. We'd seen each other around for years. I loved the way the guy played, and he seemed to appreciate what I did in the Brains and stuff. So we always kept, we'd see each other in bars and shit and go, man, we got to be in a band together. Even though I was a guitar player and he was as well. In fact, I tried to join the Satellites one time as their bass player. Oh. When Brendan quit.
Okay. No kidding.
And Brendan was a great guitar player, but he was playing bass in the band. And however, he would kind of end up playing guitar by the end of the night. Whereas I didn't mind just playing bass. I didn't really have no aspirations to be a guitar player within the Satellites. I was perfectly happy playing bass. But the first time I said, man, I want to play bass with you guys. And they all turned around and went, you're a guitar player.
That's what they told you.
Which I was.
Right.
However, I did play bass. They weren't really as aware that I was more of a bass player than I was. And essentially what I'm saying here is I just didn't decide I want to play bass in the Satellites and go out and buy a bass. I'd been playing bass for years before that.
Okay, so you had the experience, yeah.
Yeah, I had some bass knowledge at that point. And it's a different instrument than guitar, no doubt.
It is. It's one instrument I have yet to learn when seeing
Right.
a good bass player.
So to continue with your story there, but between the Brains and the Satellites, the Satellites broke up. However, they had a few gigs left. And Rick kind of formed a band called Ricky Knight and the Hellhounds. And Rick didn't play guitar, which was kind of unusual. Brendan played guitar. Mauro Magellan played drums. Keith Christopher, who played at the end of the Brains and has gone on to had quite a career for himself. He's playing in Leonard Skinner right now.
No kidding.
But he was playing bass. A guy named Jeremy Graft was playing guitar. And they played about 3 or 4 shows. And then that band kind of went its separate ways. And the only ones left were Rick and Morrow. But they still had a gig at this place called Hedgens.
Okay.
Rick called me up and goes, "Hey, man, you play bass, don't you?" And I said, yeah, man. I told you that one time. And he goes, well, do you want to play bass? You want to get? And I was going, yeah, sure. And he says, you want to be at Hedgens Monday night? And I went, yeah, sure.
I'm there.
He said, "Well, be at Hedges Monday night." So at that point, Rick went back to guitar and started playing guitar, and Mara was playing drums, and I was playing bass. So we formed a 3-piece band and just called it the Hellhounds.
The Hellhounds. Okay.
And after Robert Johnson, Hellhound on My Trail type of thing, and played whatever we wanted to play, not any original really.
Wow.
We were all Chuck Berry freaks, and we were all punks pretty much.
That had
Rick
been
enough for sure, and everything was on warp volume and warp speed to a degree at that point. But we did Eddie Cochran to and the Hellhounds ended up being pretty good.
The Hellhounds, yeah.
We played a lot. We didn't make no money, but we played a lot, and
you had fun above all.
We certainly had fun.
Yeah,
that was no doubt about that. That was another really fun thing to do. During the time, one of our friends, Kevin Jennings, who was a Uber Satellites fan, they had made a demo tape, and Kevin took it over to England and got it released on a private record company. And I can't remember the name of the record company, to tell you the truth, but they had released about, it was kind of an EP, and it had Keep Your Hands to Yourself, and it also had some other really good songs that Dan had written.
Oh.
But they had no band. The band had broken up. We were doing the Hellhounds. Dan was doing a band called the Woodpeckers. He was in North Carolina.
Okay.
And 2 years or so transpired in between this time. But Kevin, the record ended up being called Keep the Faith, because that's pretty much what Kevin did. He kept the faith, and someday the Satellites would see the light of day. And so he was instrumental, definitely. And the record got released and got real good reviews in England. And the English press was saying, well, what's up with these guys? Where are they at?
Yeah.
And there really wasn't a band. So it turned out that they were going to do a tour of England. All of this is kind of condensed. Dan showed up. I thought for a minute I was just going to lose my band, but Dan ended up joining the Hellhounds.
Oh.
Which was Rick Richards, Dan Baird, Mauro Magellan, and myself.
Oh.
Which ended up being the Georgia Satellites at that point. And I believe the record that Kevin got released in England was called the Georgia Satellites. So at that point, it went from being the Satellites to the Georgia Satellites. Even though at that point I hadn't been, there really wasn't a band. We were just going to get together and go to England because they had some some shows booked to kind of play behind this record that they had released there. And a real low budget. This whole thing was low budget. In fact, we did a show in order to get money to go to England, and we accumulated kind of enough money to pay our way over there, and everything fell apart.
Oh, no.
I don't know. The tour fell apart. Luckily, it fell apart before we got over there, which would have been a pain in the ass if we'd gotten over there and then crickets. So all of these guys are subject to question anything I'm telling you here. I'm kind of recalling all this from memory from several years back. So.
Of course.
But
this is the 80s after all.
So at that point, we just tried to get a record deal here. We were friends with Jason and the Scorchers. We knew their Kevin primarily, and Rick more than myself, and probably Dan. Probably Dan knew him better than I did. But
Okay.
so we ended up going with their management company called Paraxis. Two guys, Jack Emerson and Andy McLennan. And they ended up getting us a record deal with Elektra. Kind of the rest is history to a degree. We used the same producer, Jeff Glixman, who had produced the tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff's famous for doing Kansas. And he's very, very talented and qualified himself.
Wow.
But,
so that's another heavyweight producer.
Well, this is kind of getting ahead of myself here, but we kind of used some of those tracks that were on Keep the Faith.
Yes.
Keep Your Hands to Yourself being one of them. I ended up not playing on that track, and nor did Morrow Magellan. Randy DeLay and Dave Hewitt. Dave Hewitt playing bass, Randy DeLay playing drums, were the drummer and bass player, respectively, for Keep Your Hands to Yourself.
I see. But you did play on the B-side of the single I'm holding in my hands for Keep Your Hands to Yourself. You played on the B-side, Can't Stand the Pain.
You're correct, sir. And since Glixman had produced the tapes before and was producing our record for Elektra, some of that stuff was kind of interchanged, so to speak.
I see.
We recorded our first record for Elektra, the Georgia Satellites, and definitely vinyl. To coincide with your show here. I don't even think later on it was released on CD, but when our first record came out, it was all vinyl.
Yeah, during
45.
the mid-'80s, I think vinyl and cassettes were the primary form of music consumption.
Doubt. Yeah, cassettes, you could buy cassettes and stuff.
CDs were like for the wealthy at the time. Like, I don't know if you remember the scene in The Wedding Singer.
Yeah, CDs were kind of on the, you had to have the white lab coat on.
You remember that scene in the movie The Wedding Singer? It came out in the 90s, but it was the part where Drew Barrymore's yuppie fiance, he's like, look, I got a CD player. And she's like, oh, I got some records. And he's like, no, CDs. This thing cost me $600 or something or whatever. I don't know.
Wow.
But it's like, I realized, back then, I'm sure that's how much they cost back then. So vinyl and cassettes were still the primary form of music consumption. Only, rich people probably had compact discs back then.
Yeah, I guess... I used to say, and this isn't necessarily true. I was just me being an asshole, but I was going, as music got shittier, the ways to reproduce it got better.
Hey, ain't that the truth?
So shitty music stays around longer than say Louis Armstrong and the Hot Five for sure.
Ain't that the truth?
I just got my ex-wife girlfriend, who's my love of my life now, Cindy, just got me the I think it was the last Louis Armstrong's last receipt, and this is CD. It's Louis Armstrong in London.
Louis Armstrong in London. Okay.
Well, it's Louis in London. I think is the name of the record. Oh man, it's great. It's got all the from Dolly to it's really good.
Yeah,
it's really, really good. And those guys sound just as good as they ever sounded,
Yeah.
And I from what I understand, it's their last recording, definitely their last recording in London. And
that had to have been surreal. You wonder if they knew at that moment that this was it.
You never knows.
Who knows?
Who knows? I Satellites or Brains.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we really knew it was going to be our last gig when we played our last gig.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
MTV definitely helped.
The Brains, the Satellites as well. You could feel, for me in it anyway. The Satellites, I was lucky to be there anyway. It could have been 10 people that were me. I was glad, and we really had a lot of fun there, especially the first year.
Well, I think there was a certain space for that type of music, even though this was the age of synthesizers. Whenever somebody put out an album, especially like maybe John Cougar, Mellencamp, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Southern rock, and people put that out there, and you don't hear any of that really, or you might hear a little bit of it, but mostly hear guitars, bass,
you're
raw
right
energy.
there. I mean, it was virginal.
There was a space for that type of sound
for the time period. Dan made the statement later on that he saved rock and roll and ruined country, which is pretty funny. It's kind of true in a sense. But and there again, that was another band. The Satellites were always shooting from the hip. They love their influences, the Small Faces, the Faces. We all love Rod Stewart, we all love the Stones. I'd take drunk Rod Stewart over drunk Keith Richards myself.
I was Rod Stewart, believe it or not, actually, briefly, before the Kinks were the Kinks, they had a different name. He actually had, I was reading somewhere, I do remember reading something, that he actually did sing with Ray Davies and his band before they were called the Kinks. He did sing vocals briefly.
Wow, that's cool. I've never heard that.
Very briefly. I think they were like a high school band at the time. This was before they had changed the name to the Kinks and blew up after that.
Yeah, well, the Kinks I love them, still do.
Oh, me too.
The Brains had the pleasure of touring with the Kinks.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah, when they did Misfits, we toured behind that record. They were doing that. We didn't see them a whole lot. We did, I had some interchanges with both Ray and Dave.
Yes,
and,
the brothers.
Nick Avery was playing drums.
And, he was still in the band. Yeah.
He was still in, and I loved Misfits. I thought I've always, Ray Davies is quite talented for sure.
He's a very conversational songwriter, and his brother Dave just brings that raw energy to that band.
Dave, Dave definitely played the solo on "You Really Got Me."
He did. He shut down that
Jimmy Page did, but
I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah,
he shut that rumor down. After the major success of the first album, the Satellites recorded their second album, Open All Night. Now, to my understanding, it wasn't as successful as the debut, but I'll be honest with you. I like how the second LP is a bit more raw, and what I like about Sheila is it reminds me of the Ramones and Billy Idol, because it has that punkish sound, but also it has that romantic sound to it as well.
Dan, thanks. There again, that's Dan's songwriting. A lot of those songs, Dan had a big backlog of tunes.
Yeah.
And Rick had some real good tunes as well. He just didn't have as many as Dan did.
I don't know why that didn't blow up as much as Keep Your Hands to Yourself.
Well, thank you, man. I mean, on your phone you can get, I guess, it's your algorithms or whatever, your phone or all the people that are spying on you on the internet.
Yes.
Can tell what you like, and I get drag racing and folk music and rock and roll stuff. So they had a good thing about bands, one-hit wonders that should have been bigger, and the Satellites was mentioned on that, and that was kind of them to do that, rather than one-hit wonders that ain't worth a shit type of thing,
No, I agree, because you guys were more raw than Guns N' Roses when they came out. They were still a bit polished, but you guys definitely had that more raw edge. It was so well needed during that time in music, especially with.
Well, we've been, I mentioned Guns N' Roses. We'd been in L.A., in and out of L.A. A few times by that time, and we toured a bunch right when our records started doing well, and you could pick up like the local hot action in L.A. type paper. For Atlanta, it would be the Creative Loafing. L.A. Free Press and whatever like that over in Los Angeles. And man, even like a band like Motley Crue, tons of makeup, real frou-frou hair.
Yes.
And what made, to me, Guns N' Roses, and never even hearing a note that any of these bands played, Guns N' Roses kind of looked more like the Satellites. I mean, the Satellites, Rick always was a Beau Brummel, and he looked really good and he had good clothes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Rick Richards was never manufactured. It was never like, other than maybe the Faces, early Faces, that kind of stuff,
Yes.
And me as well. I mean, that we both love that band. He dressed better than I did. I just kind of dressed shit that I could find laying around, and I was a punk through and through, coming from the Brains on out, and Dan was very he really dressed great in the sense that he was Dan. He looked like Dan if he went to the store, or he looked like Dan if he was playing.
Yeah.
You know, and Rick the same way. You know, in fact, I can remember on the tour bus, I got pretty inebriated. Still had a whiskey, and I made a whiskey. I had on this long ass leather jacket that I wore a lot, and wore black jeans and shit, you know, and not much more, you know, leather jackets and
yeah.
But anyway, I made up a whiskey and ice, fell asleep in my bunk on the tour bus, drove about 12 hours, woke up, my whiskey and ice is still on my stomach.
Oh, my Lord.
Other than the ice, it's obviously melted. We had to play in about 30 minutes. They woke me up. I got out, drank my whiskey, what was left of my whiskey and ice, my whiskey and water at that point, and went and played. And, you know, that's how dressed up we got.
Yeah.
You know, we had a wardrobe case which had different leather jackets in it and shit like that. But back to my point there about the LA Free Press and the LA bands, when you would see Guns N' Roses, they kind of stood out just seeing pictures of them because they wore a lot of eye makeup, and where we didn't too much. We might wear a little bit of eyeliner.
Yeah.
And Dan never. You know, me and Rick maybe a little bit. But mainly if we had zits or something like that, that would be the only reason, especially if we had to do a photo shoot. Or if we did a TV show, they would make us up anyway. I was lucky to be in the Satellites. That's a band probably I should have never been in, you know. But Rick and I were real good friends. And probably Rick got me in the band. Yeah. You know, and in all fairness, I think Rick probably stood up for me, and I appreciate that for sure. And but, you know, I could have been 10 guys, and I just happened to be around at the time. But the Hellhounds had been playing for, you know, me and Marlo and Rick had been playing for a year and a half, 2 years. And we were tight. We were a damn good band. We never rehearsed. That was the whole pretext to being in the band. In fact, that's why one of the guys quit, was they never rehearsed. And Rick says, you know, we don't rehearse. And I said, I'm fucking in if we don't rehearse, you know.
I like that.
But our music wasn't rocket science. It wasn't that hard to learn.
No.
But, you know, we just got up there and pulled the trigger. And it was really a lot of fun. The Hellhounds was a ton of fun. Like I say, we didn't make much, but I've never really been in a band thinking brains, satellites, and nothing. I've never been in, oh man, I'm going to be a millionaire. Never and ever in my life have I ever done music.
That's the best approach, I think, that any musician.
Well, you know, and the dichotomy there is
mainstream.
I've been accused of that's all I care about. And
there's nothing
once
wrong
I
with
got
that.
in a band and we were making money, I definitely cared about where it went.
Yeah, of course.
And how, if we were losing it or keeping it ourselves or what have you, you know.
Yeah.
And when I saw a lot of money just being swept away, I had something to say about it. But,
of course.
You know, and I was accused of not being an artist or whatever at that point. But, you know, but from the initial get-go, you know, when everything was formed or we were doing music, you know, it was just like we had to do it.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
It was what was driving you guys. I'd like to talk about Tangled Oaks.
Oh, wow. Thanks. Man.
Yeah.
That's much later on. The Sats broken up.
Yeah.
We hadn't played in a while. I wrote, and I've always written songs, but not really rock and roll. I never wrote rock and roll songs. I wrote folk music, really, and never tried to interject them into anything, you know. I mean, you know, obviously it wasn't going to fit in the Satellites or anything like that, but always, and then I had done, after the Sats broke up, really Dan left the band in around 93. You'd have to research that to make sure exactly when he left, but in 93, Rick and I formed another version of the Georgia Satellites because we were offered a lot of money to play, you know, and I did that and managed that aspect of the band till around 2012. And I think that's when I left the band, and they're still playing. You know, they still play.
Oh, the Satellites are still together?
Yeah, the Georgia Satellite still, there's a version of that Rick keeps together.
Okay.
And wish him the best. But
Right.
I left in 2012. I just kind of had enough at that point. But
Yes.
I had all these songs. I kept playing acoustic guitar. I'd get home
And you play the mandolin too, right?
Yeah, I've been playing. I played the mandolin on a few Satellites cuts, but
oh wow,
I was a closet mandolin player for really a long time. I should be
Yeah.
a lot better on mandolin than I am, but I love playing it, and I'm a journeyman doing it. And during the time when I left in 2012, I also played in a country band that we played old country music, Merle Haggard, that ilk.
Yeah.
And it was called the Ghost Riders Car Club, and we had a gig at the world famous Claremont Lounge in Atlanta, which you can Google the Claremont Lounge, and it is world famous for being a sleaze bar.
Claremont Lounge, you said?
Claremont. It's a hotel. It's an old hotel which has kind of reestablished itself.
Adult Entertainment Club. It's got 3.9 stars on Google. The Claremont Lounge is Atlanta's first and longest continually operating strip club, opened in 1965 and boasts a completely female ownership. That's just what Google says.
You got that pegged right. But we were the house. Well, I say house band. They only had music on Thursday nights. With strippers, you don't need music. No.
That's true.
And but we kind of wormed our way in there, and they had bands and entertainment. There's sometimes DJs on Thursday nights, and we kind of grew legs there. I played there 3-4 years, really, about 3 years, I think.
Now, Sail On is amazing song, by the way. When you recommended that by Tangled Oaks, I checked that out, and I was just like,
oh man, thank you very much.
Of course, I could tell it was written and recorded from the heart.
I take that as a big compliment, and I appreciate it. Laura Joseph, who she and I hooked up, golly, well, probably around that time period, 2012 or so.
Okay.
I'm not really sure when Laura and I really started. I played a little show, and she played on the bill with me, and I heard her sing, and went, golly, that's the girl.
Blown away.
I always wanted another voice.
Yeah.
And my voice isn't that great. I can, I love singing, but I don't have I wish I sounded like, I don't know who I would really want to sound like, to tell you the truth, but I love folk music, you know, and Laura just had this beautiful, pure, just beautiful Celtic sounding voice. In fact, that's some of her background. Is you can go over there and look at her record collection, and you won't recognize any of the records. The only one I recognized was Segovia and Emmylou Harris. She was enamored with Emmylou Harris, who was a folk singer before Graham Parsons found her anyway. And Laura was, she and I just started singing songs that I had written. And Laura's a good songwriter herself, but, I had a lot of them, and I had ideas. And when I first started, I had real arrangement ideas, I'll sing this and that, but that went right out of the window when Laura started singing. And sometimes, she sounded better singing lead than I did, and kind of, some songs just lended itself to a male voice more than a female voice.
Well, the commiseration of talent definitely, comes through, especially in that tune.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
And the second record we did, I had the pleasure of working with a girl named Laura Finney, who arranged strings with us, and Elizabeth Murphy played cello. Marla Finney played violin and viola, and oh my God, they really knocked it out of the park. My engineer I talked about a little earlier, Tony Terrebonne, who super talented young kid, whiz kid producer, Pro Tools guy. We got ready. I always wanted a chamber ensemble, and finally, after some coercing, Marla kind of came on board. And when we were originally doing the first recording session, we had it in mind that we were going to double track all the string parts. But I'm never recorded with a chamber ensemble. And so, but once I heard, and these were just two instruments at the time, violin and Elizabeth playing cello, it sounded unbelievable. And they would do a track that Laura and I had already done our parts. They would just do a track, and I would ask Marla, I said, well, would you like to come in and hear? And she goes, no, I'll just play it through the headphones, and I'll play my viola part while I listen back. So while she was
Beautiful.
listening back to what she had done on violin, she was playing her viola part.
Uh-huh.
She says, "Yeah, Rick, I'll play viola and violin, and that way you only have to hire 2 musicians."
Wow.
I was going to hire a three-piece chamber ensemble, but she played. That time we'd finished, she played bass clarinet, piccolo, and all of these are symphony quality. I mean, she can play anything.
That's absolutely amazing.
To symphony quality. And her main instrument, she grew up playing violin, but she's an amazing sax player. She plays like amazing sax player. She's in a group called the Bonaventure Quartet, who do nothing but Django Reinhardt and French cafe jazz type stuff. Wow. And she's the Stefan Grappelli to my friend Charles Williams' Django, and they are amazingly good. Yeah, now, man, we're totally transcending rock and roll here at this point. These guys are way beyond me at that point. They're what I consider definitely real musicians. They can definitely play.
What's next for Rick Price? What's your latest project you're working on?
Right now, I hope to do another record with Laura. I hope to do another Tangled Oaks record. We've got one written, and Laura and I. However, this is a totally weird aside.
Yeah.
That has really ended up being incredible fun. David Michelson, the first drummer in the Satellites, who's been playing and still is playing around Atlanta forever. And this guitar player he and I played together in the first bands. He's a couple of years older than me, a guy named Rick Hinkle.
Okay.
He plays guitar. He's still, out of all the people I've had a pleasure to run into and being able to meet, he's still the best guitar player I've ever met. And as far as being a well-rounded, all-around guitar player. His parents were musicians. His dad had the Irv Hinkle Orchestra, and his mom was a lounge singer, and a real good one. And Rick has been playing. I met Rick when I was 12 years old now. And
no kidding.
He and I had a band called the King Bees when we were like 13 and 14.
That's a good name.
And aside from that one, I hate to just keep waxing here, but
no, it's fine.
When the Beatles toured in 65, I believe it was either 65 or 66. They played through Vox instruments, obviously. I mean, not instruments, but Vox amplifiers. And the distributor for Vox in America was Thomas Organ. And Thomas Organ and Vox, in every town the Beatles played in, their opening act they brought from England was a band called Sounds Incorporated, horn band, kind of a soul band. But it was the Beatles, Sounds Incorporated, and then every town that the Beatles played in had a battle of the bands. And they had a battle of the bands, and I think they did it for 6 weeks, and then the winner of those 6 weeks, which would have been 6 bands total, had a playoff, and the winner of that battle of the bands got to play on stage with the Beatles before Sounds Incorporated.
Wow.
And Rick and I had a band, and we played in that battle of the bands, and we won the first week. And at this point, we were making, we weren't the only ones. And I don't mean to make this sound like this was our idea or anything, but you could not buy light gauge guitar strings at this point.
Oh,
you couldn't go and buy Ernie Ball light gauge guitar strings. No. So we would buy tenor guitar strings, move the B string over to the G, and put the tenor guitar strings on the E and the B, and make our own light gauge strings. The first week we won, we were able to play our guitars through Vox amplifiers.
Wow.
And that was cool. We worked up our shit, what we were doing. And then the next week we get there for the big playoff, and Miss Simmons and Miss Corley, I remember this like it was yesterday, which is crazy. But Miss Simmons comes to me and she goes, "Rick, okay, now pick out your guitar." And I went, "Oh, Miss Simmons, we'll just play our own guitars." And she goes, no, this is for the Vox paper.
Boy.
You've got to play all Vox guitars. Everything that they take a picture of on stage has to be Vox. Wow. So I picked a teardrop guitar, which Brian Jones, it was a kind of a hexagon.
Yeah. Not
the teardrop, but the hexagon looking deal. And out of a box that had just come from Japan, which the action on the guitar had to have been a half inch.
Wow.
I'm not lying. I mean, I could not. I mean, we were 12 years old, for Christ's sake.
That's
You know,
you don't
so
forget stuff like that.
with
Yeah.
no advance warning or anything, in 10, 20, 30 minutes, we had to go play with these Vox guitars.
Oh no.
And I had heard I Can't Explain by the Who at this
Yeah.
point. That's the only thing I'd ever been exposed to by the Who was I Can't Explain.
Mm-hmm.
But my first inclination at 12 years old was to smash the fuck out of this guitar.
To Pete Townsend, yeah.
And the rest would have been history if I'd have done that. But needless to say, we weren't. I don't know how good we were to begin with,
Yeah.
but we weren't as good as we could have been playing these guitars.
Oh.
But a band called the Atlanta Vibrations won, who had a guitar player named Spencer Kirkpatrick, who was later in a band called Hydra, that were a big deal. They were really good, a heavy, they played through High Watts, but they were a Capricorn band at the same time of the Almonds and stuff. Wow. And Spencer, still to this day, is an amazingly great guitar player.
Wow.
And the Atlanta Vibrations won, and they deserved to win. They were really, really good.
Yeah.
So, but that's a little bit of an aside. But even with that, going off on tangent there, I am playing with Rick Hinkle again in a surf band.
In a surf band. Oh, cool.
Rick has become enamored with, well, we all, if you grew up playing during the time we did, the Ventures were the guys.
Yes.
Dick Dale. My mom, how I even was exposed to the Beatles, my mom was in the Capitol Record Club, and the Beatles being on Capitol, Beach Boys as well. So two of my, God bless Brian.
Yes.
The Beach Boys, I would have to pick above the Beatles almost. It's
wonderful
still being
songwriter.
and
Brian
just the harmonies. The harmonies are crazy good.
Yes, even all the way till when they recorded again in 2012 and put their last LP out.
And
God Save
we
the
had a
Radio
hit
or something.
on that same
God Made the
record.
Radio.
We had a song "Hippie Hippie Shake" when they had Jamaica, Montego, down. What song was that? I can't remember the name of that
Kokomo,
song. But anyway, Kokomo. Thank you. Yeah, but we were on that same record because the satellite kid. Yeah, with our song "Hippie Hippie Shake," that ended up being in the movie Cocktail, as well as Kokomo, I believe. Huh. If my memory serves me correctly, but which I wouldn't. I don't know if that's the case or not, but so that's to answer your question after 30 minutes of bullshit. I'm playing in a surf band with David Michelson playing drums and a really good guitar player named Denton Perry playing second guitar, along with my good friend Rick Hinkle. And it's such a pleasure to be playing with Rick again. Mm-hmm. And he is so damn good. And we're doing things like Slaughter on 10th Avenue. We do a song called Kiss of Fire, which I think Louis Armstrong even did down the road.
Oh, he did.
But these are not 3-chord rock and roll songs either. These are songs you kind of have to know. Yeah. I'm playing bass with these guys again, and when I had to learn these songs, I had to learn about 20 of them at once, and I was going, they Slaughter on 10th Avenue, which isn't really that difficult once you get to just kind of dissect it and learn it. But Cindy and I were sitting here, and I told Cindy, I said, man, I'm never going to learn this song. Rick had sent me over.
Sure you can.
And, I ended up learning it. We're sounding better and better, so we play around here. It's just, for fun, like music should be, and
that's the way it is. Yeah, it should be fun because, you never know. It's like, I'm sure you guys were having fun with the satellites and the brains, and then success was just a byproduct.
Yeah,
of that,
man. I mean, both of those bands were fun.
I can tell. It comes across when you listen to it years later, especially on uncompressed vinyl. It's just it's the way music should be.
Cool show. I mean, cool vinyls. Having a rebirth apparently.
It is. I go to my localish, I should say, record store because I'm in Pennsylvania. There's a place called Record Revival, and that's where I get most of my vinyl from. And then I go on Discogs. I tell you what, Rick, I'm so glad you agreed to be the first guest on Let's Talk Vinyl. I really,
man, thank you.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank Jennifer Perry for.
Oh yeah, Jennifer's a sweetheart. Now that's our guitar player's wife.
Oh, is that? You did mention that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry that even slipped my mind, but Jennifer, yes, total sweetheart. Rick and I've been on her show before, and Denton, great guy, her husband, and smart guy.
Yeah.
Egghead guy, and
yeah.
Plays real good guitar and loves effects.
Oh.
So he's in,
Absolutely.
as far as the surf band's concerned. Because if it ain't got reverb on it, you can you might as well go get you a beer at that point.
Exactly.
And I appreciate your interest in Tangled Oaks. And
absolutely.
Hopefully, Laura and I'll have an album coming at you here down the road.
My guest today on Let's Talk Vinyl has been Rick Price. Rick, thank you for coming on Let's Talk Vinyl, and look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Well, back at you, Mike. Yeah. And I did probably a little more talking than vinyling, but
that's what this is all about. That's why it's called Let's Talk Vinyl. So so thank you, Rick.
You are more than welcome, man. You have a great day here.
You too.
See ya.
See ya.